everybody. My name is Chris Kelly, and your school has asked me to come here this week to work with all of you to teach you about addiction, alcoholism, to talk to you about issues related to recovery and interventions, basically a generalized health class that focuses on drug and alcohol, and as well as ways to stay healthy. And in order to help you guys get to know who your teacher is, I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about my background. So again, my name's Chris Kelly. I grew up in Massachusetts, and I come from a real big family. I've got 5 brothers and 2 sisters. My mom and dad are really nice people, and they never abused drugs or alcohol, and they never abused me. I grew up in a loving home, and I went to public schools, and I grew up in the suburbs just outside of Boston. Now, when I was a kid, I never would have imagined me getting involved in drug and alcohol abuse. The reason I never imagined getting involved with alcohol is because my parents let me taste alcohol, and I always hated the way it tastes. I remember tasting wine and beer and just thinking, man, this stuff's awful. And I remember at my church sometimes they would have communion wine, and I always hated those days because I didn't like the taste of alcohol. And as far as drugs, when I was growing up, I just figured, well, drugs are something that some people do, but I never thought that I would do them. I knew that, though, that some of my musical heroes took drugs. I knew that the Beatles took LSD because they wrote a song about it. And I knew that the Rolling Stones took drugs because some of them got arrested. But I just felt like drugs were not going to be part of my life. But when I was in high school, I ended up experimenting with marijuana. I thought I would just try it once to see if I liked it or not. What ended up happening is the first time I tried it, I really didn't like it. So I just figured, well, that's it, I won't do it again. But I was with some friends, and they seemed to like marijuana, and so I decided, well, maybe I'll try it one more time. The second time I tried it, I remember thinking, well, I feel a little hungry, and I feel a little tired, but I really wasn't very impressed with marijuana, so I just figured, well, that's enough of that. I don't think I'm going to smoke marijuana again. But my friends seemed to like it. They seemed to be getting high from marijuana, so I decided I'll try it one last time. The third time I tried marijuana, I felt intoxicated. I felt altered. And one of the things I decided at that point, I was 15 years old, I was trying marijuana for the third time, but it was really only the first time that I got intoxicated. I made a decision that day that I would smoke marijuana for the rest of my life. Now, that may sound extreme. I don't know if most people who try marijuana decide to smoke it for the rest of their life, but that's what I decided that day. And you know what? It almost came true. When I was in my 20s, when I was addicted to marijuana and alcohol and cocaine, there was 3 times when I almost died from overdoses. So it turned out I almost did smoke marijuana for the rest of my life. But I was very, very lucky. People kept trying to help me. Over and over again, people reached out to me, and they would ask me things like, Chris, do you think you're a drug addict? They would say things like, Chris, do you think you should have a problem with drugs or alcohol? And I would always say, oh, no, I don't have a problem. Well, eventually, I started wondering if maybe those people were right. I started wondering if maybe I did have a problem. And in 1990, when I was 30 years old, I ended up getting in recovery from drug and alcohol addiction. I ended up going and joining a 12-step fellowship and getting help for my drug and alcohol problems. For the past 22 years, I've been clean and sober. For the past 17 years, I've been coming into schools, talking with students, and I want to let all you students know, I'm not here to tell you what to do. Everyone has to make up their own choice about cigarettes, alcohol, and drugs. And I'm also not here to tell on you. I don't work for the police. I don't work for your school. I work for a nonprofit agency that really just focuses on teens and health. I'm here hoping that you guys stay healthy. I have a lot of regrets about the choices I made around drugs and alcohol. Not only did I harm myself, but I harmed my brothers and sisters, I harmed my family, I harmed the girls that I dated, I harmed my community. And so I'm hoping you guys make better choices than I did, because I have a lot of regrets about the decisions I made in regards to drugs and alcohol. Thanks. Go ahead with your question.
I would like some general information about marijuana.
Oh, yeah, sure, no problem. Marijuana is probably the most popular illegal drug. It's used by more people than cocaine or heroin or ecstasy. And I think part of the reason for its popularity is a lot of people underestimate marijuana. Sometimes they don't know that people can get addicted to it. Sometimes they don't know it can have respiratory harm. I've even had people say, oh, well, because it's a plant, it must be completely safe. I think it's important to clear up misinformation. One piece of misinformation is to think of all plants as being safe. There's a type of pine tree known as the hemlock, which is a deadly poison. There's a type of bean called a castor bean, and they can make a deadly poison called ricin. Some terrorists have used that to kill people. So plants are not all safe. Some plants are poisons, some plants are food, some plants are medicines. Well, marijuana is a plant that's an intoxicating drug. Inside marijuana plants is a chemical. That chemical can make people intoxicated. That chemical can make people addicted, and it's called tetrahydrocannabinol. THC is one of the intoxicating ingredients inside of marijuana. There's also some other chemicals. One is called CBD, one is called CBN, and these are cannabinols and cannabinoids. These chemicals right here are what make people get high on marijuana, and they're also what can make somebody get addicted. Now, marijuana has effects on the mind. It also has effects on the body. Generally speaking, people smoke marijuana. Although some people eat it and some people take it as a tincture, the majority of people that use this drug use it by smoking. Now, any drug that you smoke is going to cause potentially harm to your throat and to your lungs. Now, the manner in which marijuana is smoked actually is part of the reason why it's harmful. You think about a cigarette. Somebody takes a cigarette, they breathe in, they breathe out. But with marijuana, they tend to breathe in much more deeply. They tend to inhale very aggressively. As they breathe in aggressively, that jacks up the temperature of the smoke. The hot smoke is part of the damage. Also, when you see people smoking cigarettes, they tend to breathe in and breathe out pretty quickly. With marijuana, they tend to hold the smoke in for a longer time. As the smoke is being held inside the person's lungs, that gives more time for the chemicals to absorb into the bloodstream. Some of those chemicals are getting people intoxicated, but some of the chemicals are causing harm to tissue. There's a delicate tissue inside the throat which is called cilia, and these cilia are little fine hairs that protect us, keep things out of our lungs. Those cilia can get actually burned or damaged when people smoke marijuana. So respiratory issues is one of the things that's important to know about marijuana. But there's also the intoxication. Now this THC and the CBDs and the CBNs, these tend to affect the brain. And they affect the brain in a lot of ways. First of all, there's the intoxication. Why do people smoke marijuana? Because they want to get high. And sometimes kids ask me, well, what does the high feel like? And one of the ways I can describe the high from marijuana for the students that haven't experimented with it is to talk about something you've already all experienced. Have you guys all noticed that in the morning when you first wake up, if people talk to you, sometimes you're kind of groggy or you're not really focused, and sometimes you feel a little bit out of it? That's one of the ways that people feel when they're under the influence of marijuana. Another way to understand the intoxication of marijuana is to think about how you feel just as you're about to fall asleep. Have you guys noticed that as you're falling asleep, sometimes your brain comes up with like random, odd little thoughts that don't seem to make sense? That's because as you're falling asleep, your mind is a little less logical, less orderly. And when people are high on marijuana, quite often their thinking and their mind is a little bit less logical or in linear fashion. Now, the other thing that's important to know about marijuana is the damaging effects on the mind. Because while people smoke it to get a high, there are also places in the brain where it can get negative effects. One of the negative effects has to do with memory. Marijuana is not known for causing blackouts like alcohol, where people totally forget what they did. But it is known for affecting short-term memory. It's also known for affecting people's short-term memory and recent memories, things that they did while they were high. You could have a conversation with somebody who's high. A few minutes later, they start the same conversation over again. Or you could run into somebody who's high, and then the next day they don't remember running into you. Marijuana is a drug that's known for affecting memory. My memory is very badly damaged because I smoked marijuana nearly every day for 13 years. And if you asked me about that period of time in my life, it's, the 1980s, I have a hard time remembering details like the names of some of my girlfriends. I cannot write a resume of the places I worked. I can't remember the addresses of where I lived or when I lived there. My own life is sort of mysterious to me because of the way marijuana has damaged my memory. Another area where marijuana can affect people also starts with a letter M. It has to do with maturity. The way a person gains maturity is by having life experiences. And if you're having your life experiences under the influence of a mind-altering drug, you're not always fully present for your life experiences. And I sometimes don't feel as mature as other people my age because there was a whole lot of growing up that I kind of missed. I missed going to college. I missed a lot of my developmental stages because I was under the influence of this drug. Maturity can be affected. Another area that can get affected is in terms of a person's finances. Marijuana is one of the cheapest drugs, but it still can be pretty expensive. It's not uncommon for me as a health teacher to meet high school students that are spending $50 or $100 worth of money on marijuana every week. I even meet some students that buy $50 worth and it's gone in one day. So there's a financial impact, there's an impact on the brain, there's an impact on emotional development. Marijuana is a drug that can affect people. Positively, yeah, it can give them a high, but there can be a price they pay, and the price that they pay may have to do with how it affects their brain. Thanks for that question about marijuana.